Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about using space APIs to create out of this world apps. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Linda Nichols. I'm on the Global Black Belt team at Microsoft, which is the coolest name of a team ever in the universe, but especially at Microsoft. And we focus on app modernization, app innovation, and we love Power Apps and Fusion development. I included this photo of myself here because I am presenting live in person, which hasn't happened in a while, to some Girl Scouts. And right here, we're actually doing some low code development to move robots, specifically drones. And so I love low code, I love robots, but even more than robots, I love space. So here's my scenario here for space apps. So I want to make lots of cool space apps. There's a ton of data out there. There are NASA APIs. There are APIs about, near Earth objects and meteors and weather on Mars and the photo of the day and who's in space and where is the space shuttle. There's so much data out there that you can hit an API and get back all of this data in JSON format. And so I want to make all of these into apps. And so I really needed a really fast way to create lots of really nice looking applications. As I say here, I'm not a UI developer. I can create the code to make front ends, but they do not look good because that is just not what I'm good at. So that's what's the great thing about Power Apps is that you can create nice UIs. And also I am a professional developer, but I do love low code development. So I was really excited to then use Power Apps to create my space apps. So I want to talk a little bit about what modern low code development looks like. So on the left here, we've got Visual Studio. That could be Visual Studio Code. That really could be your IDE of choice. GitHub, your revision control. And these are my professional developer tool set right here on the left. These are the things I'm comfortable with as a professional developer. On the right, I'm sort of starting from the bottom with Azure App Services. So really here, I really love serverless development. So for me, this is going to be Logic Apps. It's going to be Azure Functions. It's going to be this sort of low infrastructure, low overhead types of app services. And then those are then kind of fronted by API management. Now, API management here gives me a ton of features for my application. So I can aggregate lots of APIs together. Perhaps from app services, I even have microservices. And it also provides an extra layer of security if I need that. And right here, especially in the frame of talking about Power Apps, it creates a level of abstraction. So really, if I'm creating these custom connectors for my Power Apps, then they can use the URL for my API management APIs. And then whatever changes on the app side, maybe I change the backing services, or even I hit an external API, that URL stays the same and the custom connector stays largely the same. On the top here, I have Teams, because Teams is where I live. This is where my team lives. And so this is our main productivity tool. So if I'm talking about space apps, I want to share the space apps with my team. Well, the easiest way to do that is to create Power Apps for Teams so that when we are in our Teams channel, we can just see our cool space data. So now we're going to talk about Fusion development, which we've heard a few times here, even since the keynote with April and Scott. But I just want to kind of dive into how this applies to my space apps. So on the left, again, I have my professional developer toolset. And the idea here with Fusion development is that the professional development services are then interfacing with the citizen developers and their Power Platform kind of low code toolset. So the professional developers are using the revision control, using their IDE, and they're creating the Azure services, they're creating the APIs, they are creating the services in Azure, perhaps the infrastructure, and then maybe they're also creating the custom connectors for Power Platform so that the citizen developers can then connect to the services. And we saw a lot about custom connectors in Geetha's presentation also. And then with Fusion development comes Fusion development teams. And so these are our pro developers and our citizen developers. And I want to talk about this a lot because the citizen developers really support the pro developers. The pro developers are technically trained developers. They live in the code. They write code all the time. They write the back ends. They write the front ends. But they are not subject matter experts in everything. So the citizen developers are the subject matter experts. They are the best in their trade. They know their trade very well. And they're also probably tinkerers. They're probably people who are at least a little bit technical. Maybe they like Excel, maybe they like Access, maybe they used to be called Shadow IT. And so for this scenario here, we have our pro devs, and on our space team, our pro devs are the astronauts. And the astronauts are very busy. They are, very highly trained. They are laser focused on flying space shuttles and about everything related to space. They do not have time to learn how to mine an asteroid. So we bring in the citizen developers who are experts in mining and would know how to mine pretty much any material. We form a team with the pro developers and citizen developers together, with the astronauts then supporting the mining team to, prevent the end of the world. And, in the questions, feel free to, ask me anything about Armageddon canon or about plot holes in the movie Armageddon, or, you can tweet me at Lina Loop. So let's talk a little bit about space data APIs. And I didn't include Azure Space in here, but that's a whole other really cool thing that we can interface with to make Power Apps. But for right now, I'm kind of talking about more like open source space APIs. So NASA has many, many, many APIs just under their umbrella. So I have created apps before with their near Earth objects API to sort of predict which meteors, might strike or might not strike. Where is the space station is another great space API. And then we have the solar system open data. And finally, SpaceX. And this is specifically the unofficial kind of subreddit SpaceX REST API. And this is what I ended up using for one of my space apps, I should say. It's not the only space app, because the SpaceX API has some really great data on the crew. And I felt like for my app, everything starts with the crew. The crew goes on missions, the crew rides in vehicles, the crew operates the payload. So I would like to start with a crew directory. And then from there, I can, look at some other information. So this is what my very basic app looks like. I have a logic app in Azure that's there, my data parser. That logic app then pulls in data from this open source SpaceX API, and it sends that data out to an Azure function. An Azure function is a function as a service PaaS offering within Azure. And this allows you to run really small bits of code, very specific, almost nano services. And so that's great for parsing data. If I have something that's really big and something that doesn't make sense in logic apps, which is really a workflow, low code tool. And so the two work together really well. They're both in our serverless offering. Now, in front of that, logic apps, their HTTP trigger, I have just sort of wrapped here in this get crew API and API management. And like I said, that offers a layer of abstraction, but also allows me to create these subscription keys so I can have a little bit of extra security for my end users. And then for my Power App, my Power App is then the crew application. So now I'm going to do a little bit of demoing here. So first of all, I just want to show on GitHub what this API is that I'm using. This is unofficial, but it's a really great Node.js API. It's really good documentation, and there's a lot of good information here for my application. So now I'm going to go to the Azure portal. This is my Logic App Designer. If you're not familiar with Logic Apps, it is a low-code workflow and integration tool. It's very, very powerful, and it's very, it's built on top of the same framework as Power Automate. So initially, the trigger for this workflow is this HTTP request. And that URL is what I'm essentially wrapping in API management. So every time this is then triggered, when there's a hit made to the API, then it goes out to SpaceX. It calls this crew query. And then it sends the result of that then to this parse crew data. So the reason I'm parsing is because there's a lot of data that comes back. And really, it's not necessary for my app. And I want my app to be very performant. I really only want it to have the data that it needs. And I want it to be very lightweight. So I really filter out a ton of data there, and I just get kind of what I need. And then finally, there's a response here. And then I'm going to go to my API management instance here. So here I have my subscription keys, like a little bit of added security that I mentioned. And then I also have, this is my meteor impacts API, and then I have my RSpace API. Okay, so here I'm going to just test this API because I just want to give you an idea of what the data looks like that's coming back. And we're getting a few dots because this is indeed a live demo. But this is what the data looks like coming back. So we've got Wikipedia articles. We have lots of images. We have the patch images. We have the images of the astronauts, lots of information, flight numbers, launches, everything that's here. Now, when we want to now connect this to our Power App, we have a couple ways that we can do that. So we can go here to export, and we can export our Open API spec, which is essentially a Swagger file. And then we can use that to create a custom connector. Or we can do the better way, which is we actually create the connector here straight from API management. Now, in good cooking show fashion, I've already done that. So I'm going to go over here to my Power Apps environment. And this is a developer environment. So we talked about the developer plan, I think, earlier in some of the talks. And that's what I'm using here for my development, because this Space App is still very much development. So under Dataverse, I have these custom connectors here. I have other connectors for other apps that I'm working on. And this is the one that was created from API management. So I have a choice here. I can go through kind of the definitions here and make some changes, or I could actually just go to my Swagger file. I'm zoomed in here, so this is like not really the best way for it to look at it. But here I have lots of extra information here that I could just edit on the fly if I wanted to and save that. But I like the way it looks. It looks great. So I'm going to go over now to my app. And now in my app, I've made a connection here to the custom API so that I can pull in all of my crew data. And then here is my app. We're just on start here. I am just creating a collection to kind of cache this data that I've then pulled from that custom API. And that's the call there to get the crew. And I'm on the crew list screen right now. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I thought are really cool. So here, if I expand this gallery, this image here is actually one of the URLs that was in the data. So I just think that's one of the reasons why I want to create a Power App for the data. Because if you look at the data, you can get some information, you can see some math and some numbers and things in there. But the pictures of the astronauts is something that is just really great in this visual setting. So I was really excited to include that in the app. I also have a detail screen here with the Wikipedia article. I have a list of the missions they've been on, and then a lot of data here of the missions. I don't actually know what some of these numbers mean, but I included them because someone, I'm sure, does. And there's lots of information here about the astronaut. So let's look at what the app looks like. So it's showing all of the current SpaceX crew here and all of their great pictures. At the top here, we've got Bob and Doug. They're pretty famous because they had a splashdown, I guess, relatively recently. If I click on the picture here, he only has one mission, 0 failures. And here's the mission here. And I can do this for every single one of my astronauts. And I just get so much information here about all of them. And this app was really pretty simple to build with just this data that I pulled from only one of these space APIs. I mean, it's really like endless what I could come up with. And now with Azure Space too, that's really going to be my next project. So I'm going to go back here to now to my slides. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll answer. Also, feel free to tweet me. And finally, again, I think we want to just keep pushing everyone to please like explore Fusion development. Even if you're a professional developer like me, I'm really both. I'm the professional developer and I'm the citizen developer. And I like to work with citizen developers because I'm not a subject matter expert in every single industry. So it really, and I think too, developers, we have a lot of backlogs of applications. And the idea of Fusion Teams really opens things up to really be able to fill that gap so that we can create more apps, create more space apps. So yeah, check out the ebook, check out the Cloud Skills Challenge. I've done both of them. Feel free to tweet me about them. Here I am on Twitter, Lina Lu. And I'm really Lina Lu on everywhere on the internet. So feel free to reach out. And thanks a lot for watching my talk.